Good morning. Good morning. I was just checking out the microphone there. Good morning. Isn't that beautiful? The soothing sound of running water. Good morning. Ah, it's lovely. Morning, Claire. Morning, Craig. Hope you're well. Goodness. As soon as it's a little bit warmer, I'm getting in there. I'd get in there just now, but... Right. Here we are. Good morning. I got these little funky earphones yesterday. I hope you can hear me. I know, Linda. Absolutely unbelievable, the things that we take for granted. I was here in 45 minutes this morning. Well, less than that actually. I left the house at 6:40. No, never. I left the house at 7:15. That's 6:45, yeah. I left the house at 6:45 and I was here for about 7:20. I took 5 minutes to myself before I went and did my little live video. So here we go. Fear of change and why the familiar is so comfortable. Can't even remember. Appealing, I think I wrote. I can't even remember how I titled it. Morning, Leona. Right, so fear of change. Well, let me start by a friend that I went to school with had, I'm sure she's a psychologist, but I don't know of what, so I'm not going to give her title because I would be completely wrong in that, but she put up a post from a trauma expert, trauma psychologist, basically saying that people that are not... She'd put a post up saying that these motivational people that are telling people that if, you've got all this time to yourself and if you've not learned a new skill or done something new, then, there's something wrong with you. Well, and that opened up quite an interesting discussion in my mind and a discussion with people that I know. And I guess... Well, that would make you think that there was something wrong with you. If you're sitting in the house and you're frozen and you're not able to do Joe Wicks in the morning and you're not self-motivating enough to do all these things, right, then that these people that are doing these motivational talks about get up and get on with it are actually demonic in some kind of way. Okay. Simply, the first thing I thought of was, well, what about my buddy that started a diet at the same time as I have, and he's had great success and he's doing fantastic and I'm not, right? That was before the coronavirus. What about the people that see people driving Bentleys or driving fancy cars and they've not quite acquired that in life? How does that make them feel? So should we make excuses for ourselves that we're driving a half-decent car, or, oh, this other guy's got kids at private school, or my kids aren't at private school, or anything like that? So, does that mean that people that have kids at private school shouldn't have kids at private school? And it just opened up an interesting thought. And the thought it opened up for me predominantly was, well, that depends where your view of trauma comes from. What do you see trauma as? Now, by the mere word of that, trauma, we're all traumatised. And I would imagine that the therapist that was even the trauma therapist has had some kind of trauma in her life. Perhaps she's learned strategies to manage it and get over it and get herself to university and become an intellectual and an academic and start having the power to make these assumptions, if you like, or indeed thoughts. And that's what they are, they're thoughts. So, I'm going to answer this morning, a few mornings past have been free-flowing thoughts, but this morning I'm going to answer some questions that people have been asking me and what I really mean by being trapped with shame and guilt. Right. When we're conditioned with a belief system, right, that belief system gives us some kind of security. That belief system, whether it's a negative belief system or not, gives us some kind of security because it's predictable. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. This is just what I think and how I have thought and what I think about, right? In the book of Genesis in the Bible, which is a really old book, it talks about oneness, it talks about freedom. And the majority of people, so I've been working post-qualified, working with clients for way over 12, 13 years or something like that. And a running theme that comes up with clients that I'm working with is that they're looking for freedom, right? They're looking for freedom from their toxic relationships, they're looking for freedom from their belief systems, they're looking for freedom from their anxiety, they're looking for some kind of freedom. So, I'm answering this question right now. Guilt and shame seems also to be a running theme in the majority of people that I work with, read about, hear about. And if we look at that from a biblical perspective, because it's old, it's older than any scientific texts, and it talks about how we lived in this garden and it was a really glorious place to be. It was a really nice place to hang out. It was cool, right? And then we ate the fruit from the forbidden tree. And when we ate that, the first thing that we felt, because we had disobeyed God, was we felt shame and guilt. And from that moment on, we went into separation consciousness. Let's say that the Garden of Eden was a unified field of consciousness. And from that moment, it speaks about in the Bible that we went into duality, separated consciousness, separated from source, right? So, unified field of consciousness, ate the fruit from the forbidden tree, we went into separated consciousness, and when we were in separated consciousness, we were filled with chemicals, drugs, called guilt and shame. And since that moment, it says in that book that we were all born sinners. We were born a sinner, which meant we were born experiencing guilt and shame because we were now in separated consciousness rather than a unified field of consciousness. Right? So, if this is true, right, I was born feeling guilty and feeling ashamed. And I was also born into separated consciousness. Now, from that position, I then start to replicate in my experience, in my reality, experiences that are going to validate that narrative to make me feel separate, to make me feel disconnected, to make me feel guilty, to make me feel shameful. Right? Morning, Richard, how are you? I actually never asked. I got this new headset. Can you hear me all right? Right? So, guilt and shame. Now, if that's where our intention goes, that's where energy flows. So then we start to see more experiences in our reality that show us where we're actually separate. And in some belief systems would say that we start to create those experiences. We start to create abusive relationships. We start to create relationships where the external world tells us we're not good enough, or tells us that we're incomplete, or tells us that we're inadequate, or that we're judged. I do a good enough job of that in my own head without someone else telling me that, but nonetheless. So, belief systems and how belief systems keep us feeling comfortable, if you like, and don't ever stretch our belief systems. Now, if you can't see it, then you would judge it and say it's not real. So I can't see ghosts right now, so I say that they're not real. I can't see spirits, so I say they're not real. Right? But let's just imagine that I had never seen, well, here's an example. I had never seen like the heat that comes off the top of a radiator before. And then somebody showed me it and I went, wow, now I can see it all the time. Right? Somebody shows me how to do something that I couldn't do, and I actually get it. It's like eureka. And you have what we would describe as a light bulb moment. And again, pre-science, my granny used to say things like that. Oh, light bulb moment. And you just took it for gospel. Now that was 50 years ago. You know, she's been saying that kind of thing for. If you look at the neuroscience of what that means, a light bulb moment, when these new neural connections are made through a new experience being learned, felt and accepted, it creates about 20 watts of electricity in the neural networks of your brain. Oh, I can get that now, right? Now, those belief systems start to give us some kind of security. Why? Why do belief systems give us some kind of security? Because they're predictable, right? So if you look at, and it's not always the case, you know, some people do break the chains, but if you look at people that are in toxic relationships, men and women that are in abusive relationships or relationships where, for an example, a man that's never allowed out by his wife or a wife that's never allowed out by her husband, or it could be even more terminal, the relationship where there's abuse or violence or something like that involved in it. Now, when that person, male or female, gets into a relationship with somebody that's not all of the above, right, it therefore becomes not predictable, and it therefore becomes very, 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 very frightening for the individual, right? So if they're in a relationship with somebody that's smashed their dinner plate off the window every night, and then they split up from that relationship and they go out with a guy that makes their dinner and runs them a bath, the terror that's inside the individual as they enter into this new way of being, a lot of people actually jump ship at that because they can't cope with the unpredictability, and then go back to relationships that are abusive, where there's judgment, where there's control, where there's manipulation, because that feels normal. So we've been habitualised into lots of different ways of being, right? So Marcy just tuned in there, and Marcy, it's funny you say this because I wasn't thinking about you, but let's look at the thing that's going about just now is people seeing the synchronicity of numbers, right? So someone sees 1111. Oh, and there's this meaning been placed on that, okay? So somebody sees 1111, then that's where their intention is going. Excuse me, Ralph, come here. I have to put my dog on the lead because there's a big Alsatian. Ralph. Right, so avoid drama at all costs. So if you then start to see 1111, then you start to look for it. You start to look for it in your environment. Where energy goes, energy flows, and then it starts to show up. It starts to show up in your reality. Same thing as if, and a lot of people, hi there, how are you, sir? You well? Good, thank you. That, for an example, I don't buy into superstition of the stars in the newspaper, but if you read your stars or your horoscope and you see these things that are involved in it, then you start looking for it, right? You start, oh look, that's true. Exactly the same as the Bible. I'm not making any excuses for anything else. The minute I started reading the Bible several years ago, things that were in the Bible started showing up in my reality, and I was like, right, that book must be true. But whatever you put in and whatever you focus your intention on, okay, that'll start to multiply. Now, the example that I was going to give about that was I used to play around with property, and so I would see another property that was coming up for sale that I really wanted, so that would mean I'd maybe have to unload a couple of properties, right? So I put a couple of properties up for sale, and they don't get any customers, they don't get anything, don't get any phone calls. I think I made them too cheap, too expensive. I look at the marketplace, okay, I put the cost up, I changed the advertiser, I changed how I dress the properties. They're not dressed, they're empty, but I'm not even getting any phone calls, I'm not even getting any viewers, okay? So then, all of a sudden, somebody comes along, out of the blue, and comes up and says, right, I want to commit, I want to buy one of these properties. They sign the missives, job done. What happens? The phone starts ringing off the hook for it. Right? You've got your car in the paper, it's not selling, you've got a needy drive to sell it. You've got a needy drive to sell the property, to sell the car, to sell whatever it is, and it's not selling. The minute somebody buys it, your phone starts ringing. Have you ever noticed that? So, I'm part of a prayer group, and there was a really interesting thing come up in it the other night there, and it said, somebody had said, should I revisit this place with this person? And some commentary came in and went, no, because if you're going back, then there's self-doubt. And I sat back in my chair and I went, wow, that's amazing. That's excellent. So, get up as if your prayers have already been answered. But we don't do that. We ask for something. We ask for our mother to be healthy or happy, or, we ask for something. We ask for a new job or whatever. And then self-doubt creeps in. So we're not walking as if it's already happened. We're still living in the confines of fear. Now, looking at this pandemic that's going on, it's insidious with fear. And the social contagion of that level of fear is astronomical. It's everywhere you look. It's on Facebook, it's on the news, it's everywhere. Now, if this social contagion can happen that quickly, right, for the negative, I've been questioning over the last few weeks of doing this, what if social contagion would work for happiness, for joy, and for love? What if you lived in a community that was free of the constructs of the cerebellum, of the reptilian brain, and was living in harmony with herself? What would it look like? Well, why then do it with a community? What would it look like to live in your reality continually as if your prayers had already been answered? What if you started living, you start looking for, there you go, more so Jung than Freud, but Jung was very into synchronicity and coincidence. But similarly to the 11:11, when you start to see coincidences, they start to show up more and more in your life, and you start to get that. Gives you validation, but it'll give you control. But also that's limiting, because what you're getting is you're getting the chemicals, you're getting the drugs that are associated with that. So back to, jump about a bit, shame and guilt. Shame and guilt is a drug. Shame and guilt is a chemical. It's a feeling. And we have got probably, I don't know if MD's ever measured it, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of feelings inside us. So depending on how you're feeling, that depends on how your reality's playing out for yourself. Someone can only park their car in your driveway if there's a space for them. If you're very, very needy or very, very weak. Here's a great example. I've thought about this for years. Does a bully walk into the classroom? Does a bully walk into a classroom and scan the classroom and look for the strongest, most confident person in the room? Or does the bully walk into the classroom and look for the most vulnerable person in the room? So the bully preys on the vulnerable. Now, that's like an innate sense. It's like an attunement. It goes in and attunes with the classroom and looks for the person that's the weakest. So somewhere we've got to start to I think, not sounded like a preacher there, somewhere I believe that we have to start to take accountability for what's showing up in our reality. Not that we're necessarily creating it, being omnipresent or powerful, but somewhere that gives us a secondary gain. Somewhere by these places, people and things showing up in our reality, it's giving us either joy or it's giving us fear, or it's giving us, is it an expansive experience or is it a contractive experience? Now, the identity of, I'm going to share another story with you. My friend Maggie, I walk the dog with, well, she's now my friend. I've known her for 30 years. Morning, Nadia. Morning Stephen. Morning, Barry. Right? So, my friend Maggie that I walk the dog with, right? About, I don't know how many years ago it was, but when I started seeing her on my journey in the morning, when I was walking the dog, I would see her in front of me. I would see her starting to come towards me, and I would start straight automatically back to the person that I was 25 years ago, where I was out of control, I was completely unhappy, and I was acting out in ways that was destructive to myself, right? So I had a lot of shame about that. I had a lot of shame about the way that I was in the world. So I would see Maggie coming towards me, and I would just start tightening up with shame. And then Maggie started saying hello, and I started saying hello, and then before you knew it, we started walking together with the dogs. And I shared that story with her. I said, you know, when I used to see you coming towards me, I used to have so much shame. Shame because of who I was when I knew you 25 years ago. I said, and I'm really sorry for how I acted and how I was. And she said, we started getting into a dialogue. I'm not going to share what she said, but we started entering into a dialogue. Now Maggie and I have walked the dog round that loch for a number of years. And when I see her, I don't feel that shame. Because it's been accepted, it's been acknowledged, it's been forgiven, and it's been let go of. But I held on to that for God knows how many years. Right? I held on to that forever because it identified me at some level with something. Now, it kept me where? It kept me in the past. Right? So, we wake up every day, and are we actually taking control of our own day? Are we actually taking control of our reality? Or are we living it from a construct of the past? Most of us are living it from a construct of the past. Why? Similarly, when that friend posted that thing about trauma, and I started to think about her and think about her childhood, there are places where I have lots of shame around that friendship in primary school when I was young. I've also got moments that are comical, and I've also got I've got some resentment towards that person as well because of certain things. Where is that keeping me? It's keeping me stuck in the past. The other thing about it is that person that posted that yesterday, there's a particular piece of music that any time I listen to it, they come into my mind. Liz, another girl, every time I see her picture, I think of Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. Hip sway when I see somebody else. Now, if you don't believe what I'm saying and you think I'm talking a load of pants, right, that's fine, right? But play about with this. If you don't think you're living in the past, right, and you don't think that the past has got any domination over your present continuum, your present time continuum, then do this experiment. Go to somewhere where your childhood was. So for me it was Braidwood, right? I go down and walk through Braidwood, through the woods, down into Braidwood Pond, round the Perchy, and all the rest of it. I'll take the dog there. In fact, I'll do that over the weekend. And I do it probably about once a year. I do it in November on my birthday. And as I'm walking through those woods, quietly, no headphones on, no listening to music, no doing wee self-indulgent videos like this, and I'm walking around, There's a memory on every tree. There's a memory on every bridge that I cross, every river that I see. When I see little rivers and collecting tadpoles with my little yellow nylon fishing net with a little cane. My mind is being lit up like a Christmas tree with memories from the past. Now, is that a negative thing? No, it's not a negative thing. It can be a very enriching experience. It can be a very positive experience. But there's a lot of negativity around it. He was an only child until he was 9, Ross. I had to occupy myself quite a bit. There was a lot of loneliness. There was a lot of shame. There was a massive amount of shame. So every time I see these memories of that little boy, I can feel what he was feeling. I can sense what he was sensing. I can experience what he was experiencing. So as I'm walking through the woods of Braidwood and my neurology, my neurochemistry's wired up, am I in the state of the presence, in the moment of now, showing up completely present as a 47-year-old guy? Or am I catapulted back to an experience of the past? So how many of us are living in the present with an experience of the past? Because so many people, I was abused as a child, or I was put into care as a child, or my mum and dad divorced when I was a child, or whatever that might be. Anybody that says that to you is living with an identity of a past experience, which means emotionally they're still connected at an emotional level to that place in the past. There's a saying in recovery in the addiction world, whenever it was that you started using drugs, you're emotionally stunted at that age. And through my own 27 years of recovery programme that I've been part of, but certainly it's been 14 years since I relapsed in any shape or form. It took me a long time to gain more emotional intelligence about who I am. So, an experiment. Go to somewhere where you lived between the age of 0 and 7, right? Go for a walk and notice how your neurochemistry starts to fire up. And then ask yourself, am I thinking or am I remembering? And most of us are remembering. For those of you that are from Lanark, right? Lanark's a wee town in Scotland between Glasgow and Edinburgh, and it's got these little close C-L-O-S-E. It's like a little lane, right? that would take you up to the back of the shops, right? There's a running joke for folk that are from Lanark that those closes were actually for your mum to take you up and slap your arse when you were misbehaving, right? So every time I walk past one of those closes, morning Yasmin, morning Pamela, so every time I walk past one of those closes in Lanark, I immediately remember getting pulled up there with your arm hanging out its socket, getting dragged up the close and getting your arse smanked, right? So every time I walk down Lanark High Street, am I present in this time continuum, or am I being pulled into a construct of the past? Okay, so how do you break this? Okay, this is the negative news. I don't think you can. I don't think you can heal yourself from the deepest traumas in your mind. I don't think you can heal it, because it goes way, way back, and it even could go back to being metaphysical. It could go back to a spiritual disconnection, but we can't scientifically prove spiritual connections, so we can't therefore prove spiritual disconnections. But the big patter at the moment is it's not marijuana that's the gateway drug, it's trauma that's the gateway drug. Okay, I accept that. I agree with that. I agree with the people that are advocating that. I've been an advocate of that myself. But my belief system around that's changed, because I then started to think, well, where does trauma come from? What was the original trauma? And for me, I have to look at that biblically. And that book's been around for a long, long time. And when we separated from the unified field of consciousness that is known as God, I believe that was the original trauma. When we went into separation, separated consciousness is the trauma. Now, how do you get back to a unified field of consciousness? I don't know. I don't know, but they are the kind of questions that I'm asking. So, are you living in the present or are you living in the past? So in order to live in the present, you've got to get out of what's comfortable, because the past is comfortable. Even if it's uncomfortable, it's comfortable. Even if those memories of abuse and memories of trauma are uncomfortable, right? You're getting a secondary gain off that. You're getting a jag. You're getting an injection. You're getting a hit of cortisol. You're getting a hit of adrenaline. You're getting a hit of these very, very powerful drugs. So every time that you think of, as a lot of trauma therapists in the old days would have had you do, right, let's relive the trauma. Let's talk about it. What? Are you mental? Let's talk about the trauma. You're sitting there and your toes are all curled up and you're like, yes, tell me more. No, I'm not telling you anymore. I've had enough, right? Reliving it. Because the minute you start talking about it, you start releasing all those chemicals into your brain that were associated with it. And if it was painful then, it'll be painful now. So we've become identified with that. That's our label. That's our badge that we're wearing. The badge of honour. Our trauma. Our mother and father's divorce. Our father's death. Our mother's death. Our grandfather's death. Whatever that might be. We start to look at that as an identity. So we cannot heal the deepest fractures in our mind. We cannot deal that's why That's why therapists get on so well, don't it? And psychologists, they like you coming back. They like you keep coming back, so you can't heal it. Or a lot of them do. It's not necessarily true of them all. I was just being arrogant there. Sorry. I went away off on one. So you can't heal the deepest traumas in your mind. What you can do is become aware of them. It is the awareness that will release you from the pathology, the compulsions, and the addiction. But in order to be aware, we have to step into the position of the observer, rather than the emotion being like a vehicle on a highway, a high-speed vehicle that if you get in it, you're getting taken on a journey. My suggestion is that you observe the vehicle and you make a choice not to get into it. Good morning, sir. Are you well? I'm doing really well, thank you.
Excellent.
Aye, lovely morning, isn't it?
I know.
Beautiful. Oh, if it would only stay like this. Aye. So, becoming present and just watching and letting go of the identity of who we thought we were, and letting go of the fear and stepping into a new paradigm, a new way of being. So, rambling thoughts from Ross on Wednesday morning, Wednesday the 15th. Looking forward to Thursday to hearing what the verdict's going to be on further lockdown or not. And I wish you all a very pleasant day, and thank you very much for listening. Have a good one.